Hello, folks. Just going to live stream the president's statement and watching from the people. Hey, Water Tiger. Hello, C4, Water Tiger, and Farmer. I will, let me see. Actually, he started talking. Here we go.
From the call that he was on when Harris visited
Can you hear the audio, guys?
Delaware headquarters of the campaign, and he said, she's the one that I choose. Help her. I will be helping her. I'm not just taking a back seat in all of this. I will be doing my job as president for the remaining months, but I will also be helping her accomplish the goals of, taking the banner. So I think definitely, as James laid out, he's going to have to talk about his legacy. This is the first
Can you hear
time
that
we are
okay?
hearing
Thank you,
from
guys.
him on in a formal situation where he's going to discuss the decision to step aside and what that means for his party. So he also needs to talk about Harris and how he is passing the torch there.
And it's easy to forget that we learned about this through a statement, right? A written statement that came from Biden's social media and from Joe Biden, the team. JM, how much is this moment about reflection? Because this is such a significant moment in his legacy.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard Democrats now over the last few days talk about Joe Biden, talk about how they're already defining his legacy. And Biden, a week plus ago, said that this is not about his legacy, but it is. We are in a historic moment in time. Biden is the first incumbent to drop out in a presidential election year since LBJ did in 1968. But unlike 1968, we're just over 100 days from Election Day. That is far closer than we were when LBJ dropped out in March of 1968, and the same as when Harry Truman dropped out in March of 1952. In both of those cases, primaries were already starting to get underway, but most of the Democratic primary process still played out. And we're in a situation now where the Democratic primary process already is played out. So this is a very unique moment in time. And I think Biden recognizes that. And I would expect that we will hear some of talk about his accomplishments in this kind of arc of the historical nature of tonight.
This is not the first time this has happened, right? So let's revisit history a little bit and think about what it was like when Lyndon B. Johnson made the announcement that he was going to decide not to run for re-election. This is 1968. It's March. It's in the midst of this speech about Vietnam. It's 40 minutes in. Let's watch what he said next.
I shall not seek, and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
A historic moment, James? How similar or different is this one?
That one came as a big surprise. And David Broder, who was a famous Post columnist of the time, was at home watching on TV and all of a sudden realized, at 9 o'clock, you needed to rush into the office because you couldn't file your stories from a laptop back then. I think it caught people off guard. Johnson had actually written a page that he thought about delivering in his State of the Union where he was going to announce he wasn't seeking re-election. And then he decided while he was standing on the stage not to deliver it. But he kept it secret from all but his closest advisors. And ultimately, one of the reasons Biden didn't want to draw out, he was a young man, he was already about to run for political office, is Democrats lost the election that fall. There was a nasty convention in Chicago. Hubert Humphrey became the nominee, who was Johnson's vice president, and Democrats didn't unite behind him. So I think that experience of LBJ has weighed on Biden. But if anything, with the last 72 hours, we've seen that 2024 is very different than 1968.
It's so true. Well, we do expect for the president to come out in just a little over 20 minutes, since this is a primetime Oval Office address. It should run like clockwork, which we joke about Biden time. Every politician has their own style and time frame, but this should run on time, and we'll hear what he has to say. Let's bring in Maeve Reston on this. Maeve, you've been following Vice President Harris on what is now like the Harris Trail, right? I mean, you were the pool reporter for her speech at a rally in Milwaukee just yesterday. What was it like? How was it different in this moment? Does she feel like she's been passed the torch?
Yeah, I think, it's so interesting to watch, having been out on the trail and sort of experiencing the despair of Democrats. In recent months, they felt increasingly, regular voters did, that they were going to lose, and that, that Biden was too old to be running this kind of a campaign this close falling behind, and just going out there in Milwaukee and seeing like the absolute euphoria around her bid now. I mean, the gym was completely packed. It was so hot in there. The bleachers were completely full. The floor was full in front of her, of people. And she came out, and just like the energy and electricity that you could feel in the crowd was so different than anything else in this campaign on the Democratic side thus far. And that, is really interesting to see. But there also are, to what you all were talking about a little bit ago, there's still a lot of questions I think that President Biden has to answer tonight. His staff has not been transparent about all of the things that went into this decision at the White House briefing today. They didn't really answer in any real way, the timeline of his decision. They keep claiming that this all was decided, Saturday and then into Sunday morning. And so I think he has a very difficult task tonight in the sense that he has to reassure people that he can still do the job for the remainder of this term. The White House keeps saying that he's not, stepping aside because of anything that has to do with his health. But the reality is that is why the American people were losing confidence in him. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see how he strikes that balance tonight, passing the torch to Harris, but also reassuring people that he can do the job every day.
With us now, Dan Baltz, chief correspondent covering national politics, the presidency, and Congress. Dan, what questions do you think the president needs to answer, either tonight or in the coming days?
Well, I think Maeve put her finger on one, and I doubt that we're going to get much of an answer tonight about that, which is just what went through his mind. What was that decision-making process? Because he had resisted so strongly and vigorously all of the calls prior to Sunday for him to step aside. So, but I don't expect him to do that tonight. I think a couple of questions are, what are the real goals he has for the rest of his presidency? We go back to 1968 and Lyndon Johnson, and one of the things he talked about as a result of that was to focus on trying to bring peace talks to fruition, or to get them moving in Vietnam. Now, events overtook that, and it didn't happen. But he had some specific goals, and the question is there something like that the president will want to talk about? I would guess that it would have to do with Israel and Gaza and the release of hostages and some kind of ceasefire that brings those hostages home. That is an overriding goal that he's had for some time, and I would expect that we would hear more about that. I think another question that probably does need to be answered is what is left on the domestic agenda that he would like to try to do. There's no way he's going to be able to do anything legislatively. So what is he going to try to do to kind of, enhance what he's already done, move those things forward? And is there any way that he can protect those in the event that former President Trump becomes the next president? So I think those are a number of the things. But I think everybody's right. This is in part to try to remind people of what he has done. Interestingly, he has been trying to do that for a good long time. It has not taken on the American people. Maybe it will now. Maybe now that he is not an active candidate, people will begin to think about that and about his 3.5+ years in office differently than they have up to now.
Let's talk about voters in key states, Dan, who've been really unsure about how they might vote, or they felt lukewarm about this, especially the group of people that the Washington Post is calling the deciders, those who could really determine the outcome of the election. What are you hearing from these voters about their reaction to this shakeup?
We have a very interesting project that's going, which we call the Deciders Project, and it's a group of voters, and it's a substantial number of voters in the battleground states who either are not completely firmly committed to one candidate or another, or because of their age or their voting history, are not necessarily reliable voters. We can't tell for certain that they're going to turn out, even though they indicate that they might. Our polling unit, Scott Clement and Emily Guskin, conducted what we called a flash poll, which was to reach out to this group of voters that we had identified previously to get their reactions. And 152 responded overnight, Sunday night into Monday morning. And what we found was quite mixed reactions to the decision by the president to step aside and endorse Kamala Harris. The views on Harris, as you might expect, were quite polarized. Most Democrats were quite positive about this. They accepted the fact that the president had done what had a lot of people had called on him to do. They were satisfied with that, and they think that Harris has the capabilities to do the job. And interestingly, Libby, a lot of these voters in the deciders group tend to be younger, some people of color, and those are people that we know that President Biden was struggling to coalesce around him, that they were not as strongly for him as they had been in 2020. So the reactions of a number of the younger ones was very, very positive. Among Republicans, it was quite the opposite, as you might expect. They do not see Harris as much different from Biden. Some are not convinced that she's ready to do the job. Some think that she's done a bad job with her responsibilities having to do with immigration and the border. So what we saw was kind of a reflection of the very electorate that we've been looking at all year, quite polarized, but a little bit more engaged, I would say, than they had been prior to this announcement.
Dan Baltz, Chief Correspondent, thank you so much for joining us. A little bit more engaged. That is a very interesting observation. James, it turns out that Democrats are relieved that Biden has chosen to drop out of the race. CNN has some fresh polling out today. What does that say?
Yeah, CNN went into the field after the announcement, and what they found is 90% of registered voters overall are happy that Biden dropped out. 70% say he should finish his term. Only 29% say he should resign and hand it off to Harris for the final 6 months. But asked how they feel about Biden stepping aside in sort of a general fill in the blank, 58% of voters said some variation of relieved. 37% said hopeful, 28% said surprised, 20% said worried, 13% disappointed, 4% angry. To what Dan was talking about, the race does feel like it's been so steady, so static. This has shaken it up. This has caused people to reevaluate their thinking. Trump in this CNN poll today leads 49-46 over Harris, but that's within the margin of error. The poll that CNN did right after the debate with the same sample had Trump up by 6 points. So the race has tightened, and African-American voters favored Biden 70% to 23% in their last poll. In the poll that came out today, they now favor Harris 78 to 15. So that is this crucial Democratic constituency that is moving back toward the Democratic Party because they're excited that Harris is going to be the nominee.
Pivoting us back to Joe Biden and what this moment means for him, Rhonda. You were running around Capitol Hill today, which was a very, very busy place to be. The news on Capitol Hill has not slowed down at all, despite all of our focus on the White House right now on the campaign trail. What has the evolution and reaction been from the Hill as Democrats were worried and trying to figure out if they should try to prod Biden to make the choice not to run again? And now, as they've learned it's actually happening, how are they reacting?
Yeah, it definitely has been this evolution that I've seen since Monday, when people were sort of just waking up with only 24 hours of thinking about Biden leaving. Democrats seem on the first day to, kind of think about his legacy, think of what he was to many of them on the Hill. He was a mentor to many people. He served almost 40 years as a senator, one of the longest serving U.S. senators. So, he's been around for a long time, and a lot of Democrats knew him personally or professionally. And this was a moment where, even though some may have seen this coming, they still felt a little shock. But now, Tuesday and also today, I have seen sort of this enthusiasm where you definitely feel the energy. Democrats feel they are living another day with this, that they might have a fighting chance at not only beating Trump, but also one of their main concerns is turning the House to Democratic majority.
Men and the extent to which they've kind of gone back and forth in the last couple of presidential cycles. Biden actually did very well with some of those college-educated women. Can he help to kind of build a bridge for Kamala Harris there? It'll just be so interesting to watch.
JM, with just 1 minute to go here with you, Joe Biden still has 6 months left. What can a president do in that time if he's a lame duck president?
Yeah, I mean, Congress is going to be very difficult, and as it usually is, the final few months before the election. But we know he's trying to negotiate this ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. We know he's trying to continue to bolster support on Ukraine, and he has touted over and over again his action on chips. So we'll see how much he talks about some of that, how much it's past looking, and how much it's future looking tonight.
Rhonda, we expect the speech to start in just about a minute and a half. So let's review what is on the line for President Biden tonight and just how momentous this moment is.
I think we all need to, sit still and listen, because it is someone who has had a career in politics for almost 40 years. And this has to be a defining moment for him, his family as well. The end came probably sooner than they had thought it would just a couple weeks ago. So I really think that we are covering history right now. As we said, he's going to have to talk about his own legacy, what he's accomplished, but also pass things along to Vice President Harris and give her the blessing. I was talking to James Clyburn, who he was the kingmaker out of all of this. I was talking to him today. He said what Biden really needs to do is talk about his legacy, talk about the things, the legislative things that he was able to get through, even though there was a very slim majority for Democrats in the first part of Biden's presidency. He's going to have to talk about those things and establish to the American people who he is and where he wants to see this country go forward.
All right. Well, Rhonda, James, JM, Maeve, and I will all be sitting here listening, and we encourage you to do the same with us. Stick with us, because our Washington Post team will be with you after President Biden speaks with analysis and a look at what's ahead. We will head in just a moment to the Oval Office, where President Biden will address the nation. The second address in just 10 days, and this is the first time we're directly hearing from him on camera in person since he announced he's not running for office.
My fellow Americans, I'm speaking to you tonight from behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office. In this sacred space, I'm surrounded by portraits of extraordinary American presidents. Thomas Jefferson wrote the immortal words that guide this nation. George Washington, who showed us presidents are not kings. Abraham Lincoln, who implored us to reject malice. Franklin Roosevelt, who inspired us to reject fear. I revere this office, but I love my country more. It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president. But in the defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think is more important than any title. I draw strength and I find joy in working for the American people. But this sacred task of perfecting our union is not about me. It's about you, your families, your futures. It's about we, the people. We can never forget that. And I never have. I've made it clear that I believe America is at an inflection point. One of those rare moments in history when the decisions we make now will determine our fate of our nation and the world for decades to come. America's going to have to choose between moving forward or backward, between hope and hate, between unity and division. We have to decide, do we still believe in honesty, decency, respect, freedom, justice, and democracy? In this moment, we can see those we disagree with not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. Can we do that? Does character in public life still matter? I believe I know the answer to these questions because I know you, the American people. And I know this, we are a great nation because we are good people. When you elected me to this office, I promised to always level with you, to tell you the truth. And the truth, the sacred cause of this country is larger than any one of us. And those of us who cherish that cause, cherish it so much, a cause of American democracy itself, must unite to protect it. You know, in recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor. I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation. You know, there is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. There's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, yes, younger voices. And that time and place is now. Over the next 6 months, I'll be focused on doing my job as president. That means I'll continue to lower costs for hardworking families, grow our economy. I'll keep defending our personal freedoms and our civil rights, from the right to vote to the right to choose. I'll keep calling out hate and extremism. Make it clear there is no place in America for political violence or any violence ever, period. I'm going to keep speaking out to protect our kids from gun violence, our planet from climate crisis that is the existential threat. And I will keep fighting for my cancer moonshot so we can end cancer as we know it, because we can do it. I'm going to call for Supreme Court reform because this is critical to our democracy, Supreme Court reform. You know, I will keep working to ensure America remains strong, secure, and the leader of the free world. I'm the first president in this century to report to the American people that the United States is not at war anywhere in the world. We'll keep rallying a coalition of proud nations to stop Putin from taking over Ukraine and doing more damage. We'll keep NATO stronger, and I'll make it more powerful and more united than any time in all of our history. I'll keep doing the same for our allies in the Pacific. You know, when I came to office, the conventional wisdom was that China would inevitably surpass the United States. That's not the case anymore. And I'm going to keep working to end the war in Gaza, bring home all the hostages, and bring peace and security to the Middle East and end this war. We're also working around the clock to bring home Americans being unjustly detained all around the world. You know, we've come so far since my inauguration. On that day, I told you, as I stood in that winter, we stood in a winter of peril and a winter of possibilities. Peril and possibilities. We were in the grip of the worst pandemic in the century, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. We came together as Americans. We got through it. We emerged stronger, more prosperous, and more secure. Today, we have the strongest economy in the world, creating nearly 16 million new jobs, a record. Wages are up. Inflation continues to come down. The racial wealth gap is the lowest it's been in 20 years. We're literally rebuilding our entire nation, urban, suburban, rural, and tribal communities. Manufacturing has come back to America. We're leading the world again in chips and science and innovation. We finally beat Big Pharma after all these years to lower the cost of prescription drugs for seniors. And I'm going to keep fighting to make sure we lower the cost for everyone, not just seniors. More people have health care today in America than ever before. And I signed one of the most significant laws helping millions of veterans and their families who are exposed to toxic materials. You know, most significant climate law ever in the history of the world. The first major gun safety law in 30 years. And today, the violent crime rate is at a 50-year low. We're also securing our border. Border crossings are lower today than when the previous administration left office. I've kept my commitment to appoint the first Black woman to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. I also kept my commitment to have an administration that looks like America and be a president for all Americans. That's what I've done. I ran for president 4 years ago because I believed and still do that the soul of America was at stake. The very nature of who we are was at stake. And that's still the case. America's an idea. An idea stronger than any army, bigger than any ocean, more powerful than any dictator or tyrant. It's the most powerful idea in the history of the world. That idea is that we hold these truths to be self-evident. We're all created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. We've never fully lived up to it to this sacred idea, but we've never walked away from it either. And I do not believe the American people will walk away from it now. In just a few months, the American people will choose the course of America's future. I made my choice. I've made my views known. I would like to thank our great Vice President Kamala Harris. She's experienced, she's tough, she's capable. She's been an incredible partner to me and a leader for our country. Now the choice is up to you, the American people. When you make that choice, remember the words of Benjamin Franklin hanging on my wall here in the Oval Office, alongside the busts of Dr. King and Rosa Parks and Cesar Chavez. When Ben Franklin was asked, as he emerged from the convention going on, whether the founders have given America a monarchy or republic, Franklin's response was, a republic, if you can keep it. A republic, if you can keep it. Whether we keep our republic is now in your hands. My fellow Americans, it's been the privilege of my life to serve this nation for over 50 years. Nowhere else on earth could a kid with a stutter from modest beginnings in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claymont, Delaware, one day sit behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office as President of the United States. But here I am. That's what's so special about America. We're a nation of promise and possibilities, of dreamers and doers, of ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things. I've given my heart and my soul to our nation, like so many others. I've been blessed a million times in return with the love and support of the American people. I hope you have some idea how grateful I am to all of you. The great thing about America is here, kings and dictators do not rule, the people do. History is in your hands. The power is in your hands. The idea of America lies in your hands. We just have to keep faith, keep the faith, and remember who we are. We're the United States of America, and there's simply nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. So let's act together, preserve our democracy. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
President Biden, in a speech lasting 11 minutes, saying he reveres the office of the presidency, but that he loves this country more. He gave a pitch for Vice President Harris to succeed him and called for unity and character, praising America as a great nation because of its good people. He also gave a pitch about what he hopes to be doing with his last 6 months and reviewed what he sees as the highlights of his administration. James and Rhonda and JM, his speech also recalled his inauguration speech. He also talked about themes that he's talked about really for decades now, and then others that he has focused on dramatically since the rise of Donald Trump, and how Joe Biden has talked about preserving democracy. Other highlights, James?
Yeah, I think he wanted us to understand, he wanted to convey that he is being selfless, that he is trying to be like Cincinnatus, like George Washington, in this line of presidents who gave up power for the greater good, that this is bigger than himself. Obviously, it took a while for him to get there, but he is very much saying that he had his chance. And I thought one of the more memorable lines from that speech was, "There's a time and a place for new, fresh, and yes, younger voices." And it was a valedictory. There was a humility that he was trying to convey, but there was also a pride. And I do think he will get some kind of bounce in the polls. I think people have seen him as a political figure, as a partisan figure, and he did come across as a statesman. And I do think that there are a lot of people who maybe will reassess the last 3.5 years in light of the fact that his name is not going to be on the ballot in November.
Rhonda.
Yeah, it did seem like he wanted to make sure that he said that this was a sacrifice. He said that we are at an inflection point. We've all heard him say that he decided to join the race back in 2020 because he was concerned about Donald Trump, specifically after Charlottesville. And according to Biden right now, he's dropping out of the race and handing this over to someone else who has a better chance at possibly beating the former President Trump. So he did try to strike a tone of, I'm doing this as a statesman.
Okay, my
But there is
friends,
sacrifice
guess
involved
that's
because
going to
nothing
be
should stand in the way of
all for these
democracy.
folks. We're just going to get into more blah blah. I just wanted to share that live stream with you. Um, I will catch you guys later on, but I'm loving the results of this poll, and I'll end the video right here. But so, do you think the speech was garbage? So, of the 9 people who voted, 55% it was garbage, 33% were mesmerized by his orange face, 11% did not understand what the flip he was saying, and nobody thought it was good in any way, shape, or form. Ladies and gentlemen, you guys have a blessed night. You guys be safe. Hey, if you're traveling, remember I've been preaching it. You saw my video earlier. Be ready. Like Lucky had pointed out, in a you get caught in the airport or you get caught on the road. You need to give yourself options. Uh, that's part of the key there when you're on the road. It's not you can't have everything with you, but have enough so you can make some choices on the fly. Guys, God bless, Godspeed. I will see you all later on. You'll take care of yourselves. And thanks for joining me again.